Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. The first story. The golf course keeper said he was going to take me off the minimum wage. The second story. Leader did not listen to me because he thought that he was the smartest. The third story. I had several paid vacations and used them all on Fridays. Today's first story is, stop playing with the Yellow Jackets? Okay, but they tend to get a bit stingy when they get bored. I worked at a golf course for a while. One day I was out weed eating and came across a Yellow Jacket nest. Fortunately, the first ones to come out just happened to hit my string, so I saw them before they could get to me. I stood there for a while with my string spinning over the opening. Not a single one made it out crawling or flying. Then the superintendent of the golf course came up to me and started yelling at me for staying there too long. Normally, I would shut off my weed eater when he got my attention, but I wasn't about to let them out. I pointed to the opening and the bisected Yellow Jackets flying around the place and told him I couldn't move until they stopped coming out. He yelled back, "Get this effing area done in 15 minutes, or you'll be coming in Sunday to stir the compost pile." I just said okay, backed up as fast as possible, took a few stings and bites, but since at that point he was closer to the hole, he got the worst of it. Nearly hit 3 golf carts after he got back into his utility cart and sped off, and when I finished up and got back to the shop, he called me into his office to yell at me. He wasn't going to fire me. He's the type who will give you the worst jobs until you quit, so you can't claim unemployment, and he said he was going to knock me down to minimum wage. At that time, I was only 10 cents above minimum wage, so not much of a threat. I would be coming in every Sunday to stir the compost, and he'd figure out how to deal with the overtime issue later. I calmly reminded him that if the Sundays took me above the 40-hour mark, the only way he would be able to legally avoid paying me overtime would be to give me time off throughout the week to keep me at or below 40 hours. Then I reminded him that not a single Yellow Jacket had made it out until he demanded that I move on. They only got out to attack after I followed orders that he had issued after he clearly saw that there were Yellow Jackets trying to leave the nest. Then I asked him if he was going to report the injuries I sustained as a result of his orders to security. All injuries had to be reported to security no matter how minor, but we usually just let mild cuts and stings that didn't cause an allergic reaction slide. Or if it was my responsibility to do so. I wasn't actually worried about the stings. I had gotten worse from larger nests at my brother's house than I did at work with no ill effects. But when dealing with someone like this, you pretty much have to point out all your missile silos, so to speak. He was never the type to admit when he was wrong, and that didn't change that day. He still acted like I was solely responsible for both of our stings, but he just sent me on to my next task, still earning 10 cents above minimum wage, and I still had Sundays off. Edit. I forgot that Yellow Jacket might only be local to the US and Canada, so I didn't think to explain what they are. I keep forgetting Yellow Jacket is probably just a US name, so I didn't think to explain it. They're small, incredibly aggressive wasps. I've worked around numerous wasp nests and the wasps just go on about their business, but I've yet to even walk near a Yellow Jacket nest without them going into defensive mode. I've always heard they were small hornets, which is the subspecies of wasp, but everything I've found so far differentiates between common wasps, hornets, all hornets are wasps, but not all wasps are hornets, and Yellow Jackets, so I could be wrong. They do sting pretty bad, coupled with biting. If you get a single one on you, you'll end up with 2 welts, one where they sting you, and another one where they clamp down with their jaws. In hindsight, I probably should have reported the stings, particularly since I found out just tonight while researching whether they're hornets or wasps, that they can carry some pretty nasty bacteria that can take you down even if the venom doesn't impact you. But this was back in 2008. At this point, it's far too late to report it. In fact, I had forgotten about it until I watched a video of a guy digging up a Yellow Jacket nest. Once it reminded me of my own encounter over a decade ago, I decided to post it here to see what happened. At this point, it's too late to report it. You should have done it earlier. The manager has no right to give such instructions. Like you said, he's the type to give you a worse job until you quit, so you can't claim unemployment benefits. They don't need a paper trail to fire you, but they will need one to show that it was done for good reason. I suggest you look up constructive discharge laws in your area. If you still have the contact information of past people who left because of this behavior, give them that information. Also, always report workplace injuries no matter how small. There are many reasons why an employer can't fire you, and if they do, it's wrongful termination. It's easier, so it's important to report bites. If you're subsequently fired, it will probably be seen by the courts as retaliation. He got hurt, so we fired him, almost never ends well. Also, I hope you find a much better job, and don't submit to this scum. The second story is, supervisor insists he does not require instructions for the most simplest of tasks. I'm not usually one for malicious compliance, but a few months ago we got a supervisor who's just a D. He shifts all his work onto others and then complains about how hard his job is. Let's just call him Gary from here on out. My work operates 2 sites about 30 miles apart. Being in security, we're responsible for both sites. Last night, one of our night shift guys up and quit due to Gary's never-ending BS. And as Gary implemented overtime restrictions, there was no one to cover the shift, which meant Gary had to, as the contract requires a minimum amount of staff at all times. As part of the night shift, one guard is required to drive over to the second site and do a routine patrol 3 times during a shift. Gary, of course, decided he wasn't done with his BS and made the executive decision, I told you he was a D, who says that rather than wasting time driving between both sites 3 times, one person would drive over and stay there overnight. This, of course, was a bigger waste of time, as there's nothing to do but make sure the building is secure. You just need to check doors and fences, which leaves the rest of us a man down for all the main site duties. So Gary decided he'd be the one going to the second site and wanted to sign out a work vehicle. Gary, of course, decided that since he wasn't officially on the gatehouse duty, I would have to do the checklist and sign the vehicle out for him. As I went over the vehicle, I noticed the tank was low, so I checked who's previously signed the truck out, and lo and behold, it was Gary, because of course it was. Now, our work vehicles are all propane-powered. They were not factory-made like this, and were instead converted. The conversion left the old fuel tank and fuel fill point in place. I'm sure you can all tell where this is going. So I went and got the book, which tells you exactly where and how to fill the truck up and try to hand it to Gary. Gary asks WTF is that, and I begin to tell him it's to show him how to refill the vehicle, but he cuts me off insisting he doesn't need instructions for the most simplest of tasks. I asked Gary if he's ever refueled one of the work vehicles before, to which he replied, I'm sure I'll manage, and he pushes the book aside. Now I could have easily just interjected and told him how to fill up, but I decided F it. I had it with his SH. I very slowly started going through the checklist item by item, starting with the ignition switch. By the time I got to tire readings, Gary yanked the checklist from me and signed off on everything, including that he had read and understood Auto Gas Refueling Procedures Booklet A, and told me to open the effing gate, so I did. I never saw or heard from Gary again for the rest of the night. Honestly, I thought it would just be a bit of inconvenience. He'd be unable to work out how to use the auto gas pump, and he'd have to call me or one of the guys and ask for instructions. I actually forgot all about it by the end of my shift. But that was not what happened. I was called into work before my shift today for a meeting, as the security manager wanted to know how it came to be that Gary ended up stuck on the side of the road out of gas, after he pumped 26 gallons of gasoline into the old tank, and drove off and somehow didn't notice fuel pump indicator light on the dashboard, until the truck sputtered to a stop about 10 miles from the second side. The union rep had my back, which was great, and Gary has been given some leave after he was informed he would be paying the cost of the fuel in the tow. I didn't intend for a minor bit of malicious compliance to end up this serious, but 2 weeks without Gary is going to be great. I'm glad you can now enjoy your time without Gary. It always amazes me when someone like him becomes a manager. They must know something, because with that attitude you won't climb the ladder. You'll be shown the door, and you will lose your job. All Garys are like that, and in general, Gary is the default name for people looking to hurt themselves in their careers. I saw one. His name is Gary. The guy my blacksmithing instructor taught managed to burn his pants in 3 months of training because he refused to put on an apron when he was working with steel that was red hot, almost to the point of white hot, and he gave it hard blows, even though he was told he could get caught if the metal was too hot. Well, Gary made the executive decision to F himself right now, and that decision was implemented beautifully. The last story is, no overtime. Please adhere to the rules. Well, problem was that the rules were established a total of 4 times, in different times. I started working as an engineer in a multinational company. Decent pay, really good benefits, etc. Only catch was that I was hired through a recruiting company, hence the good benefits, so I was basically a contractor. Contract was simple. It specified hours, vacations, and important overtime pay. I start working, and first weeks were good. No overtime needed. Not a fan of it either. But then comes the need to stay late, so I ask one of my managers if there is no issue with the overtime, to which he replied that my position is salary. Not really his fault, that's what he was told. So no overtime. No problem, not a fan. Then I ask about what the rules are then. He had no idea, as I was the first salary contractor employee he had. We asked the HR rep, She gives the rules that specify that any extra time worked could be compensated with paid leave, and I had to keep track of my hours. Good enough, I complied, didn't even use all the hours. Time passed, then a few loaded days at the end of the month, and at the start of the month I went to the hospital to help a friend, and was counting on using the extra hours with paid leave, only to find out that I couldn't, as now I was being told that I could only use them at the month they happened, so no hours to spend. I adjusted and complied again, even when they screwed me out of one full day of paid leave. Time passes again, and I'm starting to stack hours, and can't even use them due to the project I was working on. So one Friday I'm asked to come in on a Saturday, and it's almost the end of the month, and ask if just this once I could have overtime instead of comp, and my other manager had two, both direct employees, says that it's not possible, that we have to follow the rules, to which I state that she remembered that I'm outsourced, and have a contract that states I have to be paid overtime, that I only get verbal confusing rules about this. She was already giving me too much time workload, and we had our small professional differences, due to the urgency of the project, and she said that she would check with the new HR supervisor about my case. She writes an email, where HR states a new set of rules. Any extra time during the week must be used within the same week. To get a paid leave day, I would have to work at least 6 hours on Saturday, and those Saturdays had 2 months expiration date to be used. This new set of rules practically voids all the hours I stacked, and I wasn't having it anymore. Enter malicious compliance. Come July and August, I started complying, not staying during the week, unless I was giving notice that I would come late the next day. They didn't like it but had no say in this, since they made the rules. And when asked about going 2 to 4 hours on Saturday, I would say yes, and work exactly 6 hours to get a paid leave day, 9.5 hours. By September, I had a few paid leave days and used them all on Fridays, since they could not ask me by phone to come on Saturday, so no Saturdays. They weren't pleased either, because they had to pay overtime to other employees to get things done. As a side note, I never neglected my work. It was an all-hands-on-deck situation for many months, and they liked booking me since they didn't have to pay me overtime. When mid-September rolls around, I gave my 2 weeks notice, got a better job, where like half of the days were paid leave days. Hey, I complied with the rules. It was petty at best, but I felt like I won the final round. Edit. All the people in my salary range had direct contract, so company rules, and all the ones with an agency contract had overtime with no problem, as they had a much lower wage than myself. It seemed that they didn't know how to work my case, and they took the easy way out, but now I'm in a better place. Once you earn time off, vacation, or sick leave, you can't lose them. At my job, the company tried to implement use it or lose it by the end of the year, but quickly backed off. So when I accumulated a lot of time off, I decided that I would use time off every Friday during the year. Haha. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and have a good day.